Hello, everyone. So my name's Matt Broadbent. I'm here with Oliver Bates today, and we're going to talk about. I apologise. We're going to have to swap the mics because both of us are speaking. But we're going to talk today about greenhouse gas effects and rebound effect. Sorry, greenhouse gas and rebound effects in AgTech or agricultural technology. So who are we, where we are from? It's a question I ask myself almost every morning, I would suggest. I'm not actually sure who I am anymore. So I have a background in computer science, in computer networks, network systems, cybersecurity, sensing. However, I now find myself at SRUC, so Scotland's Rural College, where I'm part of the Dairy Research and Innovation Centre, and I've been there for the last 5-6 months. Oliver, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I do know who I am. I'm Oliver Bates. I'm a research fellow in the School of Computing at Lancaster University. I'm sort of a user, design researcher, human factors, HCI. That's the kind of bucket I fall into. Got a long history of working around energy and ICT, sustainable last mile logistics, commercial energy. And I sort of do systems thinking, creative methods. And yeah, me and Matt are on a new adventure, doing systems thinking around digital twins and AgriTech, I think.
So, this is, I would say that the genesis of this talk is based on my observations and then conversations with Oliver, but my observations coming into the agricultural sector as a computer scientist. I would observe that the dairy sector in particular, of all of the agricultural sectors, the reason why we focused on dairy is because they have been forced, the margins are very fine in the dairy sector. They've been forced to be efficient and to innovate over the past few decades. And I would say as far as those agricultural sectors go, dairy is the furthest along that journey. There is a lot of digital tech in dairy already. This is driven almost entirely by efficiency. So we're talking about milk yield, so the amount of milk, the quality of that milk, and things around, for example, the fertility of animals, the welfare of animals. This is driven by things like ambient and real-time sensing. So this is environmental sensing. This is sensing on the animals themselves. There's a lot of talk of things like drones, automation as well is in there. As the last speaker mentioned, artificial intelligence and machine learning has become a buzzword within the dairy sector. There's a lot of dashboards and visualizations. Interestingly, these are often linked to a particular vendor. So a vendor will have their own dashboard for their own equipment. There's a lot of work to do, I think, in terms of interoperability there. Yeah, again, automation. So there's a lot of automatic milking parlors, for example. You can have farms now, particularly large farms, where there's maybe 1 or 2 people physically working there. And the rest of the farm is fully automated from, like I said, milking, but all the way down to quite mundane tasks such as pushing feed. So there are robots that will go along and will push feed closer to the cows. The communications infrastructure as well that supports this. So sometimes this, you'll have things in the shed, but oftentimes this might be sensing if you're doing environmental sensing, this might be remote sensing and digital twins. So we saw that mentioned in the previous presentation as well, but this is something that I'm personally working on. So what does a digital twin look like for the dairy industry? This is often seen as a driver for that efficiency, to understand what that looks like in what does efficiency look like when you have a digital twin of a dairy farm. This is a slide I really like, simply because my colleagues use it a lot, and I think there's some really interesting insights, and it will hopefully show you a little bit about how the dairy sector currently operates, and to some extent their obsession with efficiency. So this is used to show the amount of the kilograms of carbon per liter of milk. It's controlled in the sense that they control the quality of the milk. So this is using fat and protein controlled milk, FPCM, and it shows you. This is a comparison of different countries. So it takes the milk output of the country and then the carbon, the greenhouse gas emissions, the carbon efficiency of each of those. So at the top, you've kind of got your more emerging economies at the top, and this kind of moves itself down to an example here would be this is the USA. Right at the end there, if you were to take this, the USA is the most efficient in terms of greenhouse gases. Oh, sorry, I'm using this for point. Let me swap hands. No, let me swap hands. So one thing that's kind of interesting to me is the US, on paper at least, is the most efficient in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. However, if you look at some of the mega farms in the US, I would argue that it's a much more complex problem than that. It doesn't consider things like animal welfare, but also it doesn't consider the total carbon emissions that are coming from those dairy farms. Over to you, Oliver, I think.
Yeah, I think there's sort of a transition bit here where Matt's working on a digital twin project around AgriTech and dairy farming. And a lot of it, you know, the entire discourse is focused on efficiency and how do we get the right data sets and sources. You know, they're engaging with farmers and academics. Matt works on a farm, the university, you know, it's very much based in practice. And we started having conversations about, okay, so what's the sort of like impacts around people? So for those of us who are not, don't know about rebound effects occur when an intervention to an existing purpose or system, such as AgriTech, results in unintended consequences, including those that go directly against the initial intended outcome. So as soon as we start thinking about digital twins and data, I think you've noticed this, the nature, the animals, the land is less discussed. It's more about, the right data in, the right model. And so that's a bit of context for the discussion we've been having. And yeah, I guess I'm listing things you've observed and talked to me about. So Matt's talked a bit about techno solutions coming in, farmers being sold a piece of technology. You can save this much money or whatever by our tech. We've got 1 minute. Okay. All right. So farmers are spending less time with the farm, more time with the tech. We talked a lot about sort of like lock-in in terms of like you procure a solution, now you have to use that for sort of forever because you can't get your data out, whatever. And because digital tech is not really thought about within farming, it's beyond the farm gate. There's an interesting phrase that Matt, anything that's outside the farm gate, farms don't think about in terms of their carbon footprint. So that really limits how digital technology is thought about. So we have a bunch of provocations that I guess we want to explore in the paper that we're probably going to write. I guess the one I want to point to is like what is a just and sustainable transition for farming? How does low carbon technology play a role in that? But also, what does that mean for farmers, animals, ecology, nature, the land, etc.? And that's a much longer vision rather than what's the right tech to put in now. And there's a whole thing as well that Matt talked about. It's the last thing, and then we're finished. Farmers really like to fix their own stuff and get into it. And digital technology, there's a lack of openness. It's not like, like tractor, I see it's broken, I can fix it. So that's a proprietary technology. It's not designed in such a way that a farmer who doesn't know a lot about ICT right now can come along and fix their stuff, diagnose the problems, even use the data and access it. And that's some of the stuff you've been seeing. So done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next slide, Mark. Woo!
Okay, so we have 2 minutes for questions. If you could just repeat the question from...
Sure, yeah.
Go ahead.
So you mentioned that the Scottish dairy have very slim margins. The hard thing about sustainability is about future practices. So can you say something to how your technology gives people the data to push back on the slimness of the margins in the first place?
So we're talking, the question was around the slim margins involved in dairy farming, particularly in Scotland, and how technology could be used to push back against that. So are we asking, is there room for example, the consumer to pay more for their milk and then that, reflect back in the farming practice, so whether that'll be more sustainable? Yeah, it's a good question. Unfortunately, I don't think the market is currently built in such a way that that is allowed to happen. So in Scotland, well, in the UK in general, I would say, the market is dominated by what are called milk contracts. So these are large contracts where farms sign up to them, they get paid a certain amount. That is a guaranteed amount, which is why they're attractive to the farm. And that is where I would see the change. and it's not necessarily, sustainability is becoming increasingly part of that, but at the moment that is the way that farms are forced to change their practice in some way. So that has been things like hoof health, animal welfare. We are seeing this now. So the producers those are the guys that have the milk contracts, so to speak, or provide them. We are seeing they are increasingly pushing the responsibility onto the farms. And in fact, you might have seen it in the press recently about the use of a feed additive to reduce the carbon emissions of the actual dairy cow. I think that's how we'll see that change. But unfortunately, I think we won't get there until we see farmers producing their own milk for direct sale. They're not then tied to the supermarkets and the bulk buyers, which have got a lot of the power right now. Hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, we don't have more time.